look, the question here was, can we have a progressive and productive agenda? And the answer to that is clearly yes, and the contributions that you've heard so far, and I have no doubt, though I missed Nita's, that she was telling you about the great work that the IPA do, that there are great examples of productive trade unionism and a shared agenda between unions and employees that are delivering in terms of UK productivity and on the bottom line of companies, and most importantly for the unions members. And I mean, particularly can just say about, I think what USDAW, what John in particular has done with Tesco and others has been absolutely exemplary at times when things are difficult for the trade union movement and there are falling roles. A way in which you have been able to show the hundreds of thousands of people that you represent that you actually can make a difference for them, and there is a real case for someone coming into the stores where you have agreements and joining the union is, I mean, it's simple, but it is so fundamentally important, and it's one of the things that I think we've got to reevaluate. I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. There were other examples where you have established and productive and effective union relationships. Of course, I am the MP for Bower and Furness, and Bower Shipyard is the only shipyard, the only place in the UK that can make nuclear submarines. Incredibly high-skilled manufacturing and engineering base there. One of the real jewels in the crown of UK production, and a very difficult road where there has been a lack of certainty on investment or orders from the government, really difficult investment decisions and employment decisions that have had to be made by that shipyard. And I think the defence industry and some of the other areas of high-skilled manufacturing have shown how similarly you can have a workforce represented through their trade unions that are fully engaged with a shared common agenda of, look, how do we get orders, and how do we and therefore how do we sustain jobs, and are prepared to go through the difficult decisions and a match my employer which is prepared to do that leaves you in the place where you can actually sustain those jobs. But the question, of course, and I think this has triggered the need to have this discussion, is why is that not more commonplace, and why are we stuck in such an adversarial relationship in so many unions? And frankly, why are there perhaps even more importantly than that, but related to that, why are there so many workplaces in Britain which are currently ununionised and have such a low take-up of individual union members? Well, this problem is clearly really difficult to crack. It strikes me with the current wave of threatened strikes in the public sector, although we're mainly concentrating on the private sector this evening. You look at that and you can see just the lack of a basic shared understanding in the nature of the problem on pensions, and there's got to be, to face it, responsibility on both sides for that. Primarily, you've got a government and employers who are just simply not prepared to engage in a meaningful way with trade unions. You have employees who are rightly and understandably incredibly worried, deeply concerned with the scale of the changes which they are worried are about to be forced on them, which are going to make very significant differences to their retirement and indeed on their take-home pay now, as contributions are being ratcheted up. But there is no meeting at all about the basic problem which faces pension funds and the need to tackle them. And until you can create a better environment where there can be that actual meeting and shared analysis between, in the case of public sector pensions, government and government, individual agents, public sector agencies and workforce, then you're simply not going to get close to the kind of productive agreements and arrangements that have been talked about so far today. And that is, of course, the problem of pensions is, of course, not confined to the public sector, and there have been really difficult negotiations that I know that Usdaw and many others have been through, and yet there is, where that level of trust has existed before, it has been easy to get into the difficult substantive talks, and it seems to be at the moment for the government and the public sector unions. You've got a similar case in transport sector at the moment, with a lack of a shared understanding, a shared analysis between the workforce within the rail industry and the government, and clearly real challenges that the rail industry faces in terms of spiralling costs, and faced with a new administration which is prepared to put place far more the cost burden for travel onto individual fare payers, in a way which is seeing 10% price hikes, and a government which is determined to knock costs out of the industry and has clearly targeted the workforce to take a lot of that burden, and a workforce which is just not prepared to engage on those terms. And you are potentially heading for a similar kind of breakdown in trust there, as you're currently seeing on the public sector pensions issue. So, I mean, the question is, what can the government do? What can we do on a wider level? Well, the government has got to show leadership. It's got to lead by example, and it is just palpably failing to do that in its role as employer on the issues that we've talked about, with the real difficult breakdown in relations that you are seeing. I think we've got to think in terms of, as we formulate a programme that we can implement as a future Labour government, we've got to think about what can work and what ways that we can be effective in incentivising the kind of best practice relations that do exist. And I was really, when I was played a role in government before becoming the MP for Barrow last year, I was John Hutton's advisor in a number of government departments, including the Department of Business. Really pleased to play a role with Nita in setting up the really important employee engagement work that she was able to carry out for the government in a way which does provide a template that we and Unions 21 and people can find new ways to actually get out onto the ground to do. And I think that the work that we are committed to do as an opposition, which is being led by John Denham in the and the shadow business team, in actually no longer, I'm not sure we ever did this, we ever did this quite as starkly as it can be portrayed, but not being neutral about the kind of businesses and the kind of business practices that we support in the UK. Now, this has got to be fundamentally about increasing the prosperity of the country and delivering a better deal for working people, and returning to the kind of prosperity that currently seems a long way off. Now, and so you can't do this in a way which moves away from just the need to create more jobs and create more wealth. But we are determined to look at the best examples and look actually at how these productive relationships between employees and the workforce are actually adding to their bottom line and find new ways to incentivise the kind of good practice that we've been talking about today. And we don't and nor should we at this stage, this far from probably from a general election, have the answers to that. But it's something that we are committed to thinking boldly and looking for, you know, the kind of new approaches that we are going to need if we're going to change, if the government is going to be able to play a role in changing the game. But finally, and I've turned up late and talked at length, but finally, we have got to recognise the limit of government in this, because government has got to provide the playing field for this to happen. But this is about individual businesses, individual trade unions, and look, individual members of the workforce. And I think, you know, almost as much as anything, we have got to actually think about that as individual trade unionists, and what we can do within the Labour Party and within the Labour movement to change the focus often within the trade union movement. I have so much respect for what unions like us do, and all of the unions do in individual workforces, and I want to see the kind of changing culture which makes that more of the focus and less sometimes of the kind of straying into other issues and taking deeply problematic and often unhelpful stances in a way that actually, if you are a working person or a young working person coming through and you look and you want to know what your trade unions can do and whether it is worth getting and paying your subs, then I want to see them focusing on the kind of thing which Usdaw are doing and not on things which are not actually going to reverse the long-term decline in trade union membership that we have all got to be about seeking to address.
Okay, thank you, John.